the time of this interview, I'm 86 years old. I was born in 1935. I saw part of the Depression. I saw World War II. I was raised by my grandparents, Lucy and Charlie Witwer, from the age of 6 months until I left home at age 16. I had a successful career in the business world, and I'm a published author of 6 books. The most important published book I have is one called The Witwer Files. The Witwer Files is based on actual events that occurred in a river town between 1913 and 1916. The main character in the book is Charlie Witwer, who is my grandfather. This all happened in a small community called Hillview, Illinois, which is a river town 4 miles from the Illinois River levee. It has a population of over 630 people at that time, but provided services for a large number of farming families in the community and in the area. The community is east of what is called the Badlands, which is the river bottoms, which were notorious and still are for flooding. And most of the people traveled by horseback, horse and buggy, horse-drawn wagons, or by train. There was a passenger train that traveled through Hillview 4 times per day, brought many visitors and business people to the community. The town could boast of having the largest apple orchards in America. Unfortunately, it was overran by violence and murder from a group called the River Rats Gang. For a small town, its murder rate for unsolved crimes made it the murder capital of southwestern Illinois. As an example, in 1902, a body was found on the tracks. In 1903, drowning in a well. 1903, another body found on the railroad tracks. 1904, death determined by suicide and of drowning in a well, but the locals thought there was foul play. 1908, in November, another body was found on the railroad tracks. December 10th, 1910, murder by gunshot. Nobody knows what happened there. May 1912, headlines read, "Death by drowning." You know, they couldn't keep law enforcement in this town because the gang would intimidate the marshals and they would leave. One of the marshals was drowned in the Illinois River. They said it was an accident, but we knew better. The drowning was considered accidental. Most of the people felt like it was the work of the River Rat Gang. Another marshal just took his family and left Hillview. No one seemed to be able to solve the problems of crime and violence until Marshal Charlie Witwer and his 3 deputies' brothers were hired to clean up the violence. Marshal Charlie Witwer had been a railroad detective prior to him becoming the Hillview Marshal. The book is inspired by actual events and tells how the lives of those individuals were forever changed by the events that took place in just 2 short years. This book can be purchased, automatic copies of it, through Pacesetter Publishing Company, a family-owned Illinois company.
My name is Doreen Ware, and I live in Hillview, Illinois. I was born in Hillview, and we lived in the apple orchards most of our life. I met Don one day. He had come to Hillview to find out where his grandfather had lived, and he wanted to know if some of the stories that his grandfather had told him were true or just that he was a good storyteller. And so he asked someone downtown where he could get information on Hillview. And so they told him to come to my house, and that I had history of Hillview and also of World War II. And so he came up to my house, introduced himself, and so we talked for a while, and then I finally asked him in. I thought, well, he was a pretty good guy, so I asked him in. And he told me what he was wanting to do. He wanted to write a book about about his grandfather. And so he said he's told me a lot of stories about Hillview, but said I don't know if they're just stories or if it's true. So I said, well, just sit down there and start telling me some of the stories he's told you. So he sat down and started telling me different things. I said, yeah, that's true. And so he'd tell me something else, and yes, that's true. So this went on for an hour or so, and we really got acquainted because I felt like his grandfather had told him enough about Hillview that he wasn't a stranger. He knew quite a bit about Hillview, but he just didn't know if it was true or not. And so I told him, I said, it's all true, everything you said. So the book that he wrote, the Witwer Files, everything in that book, so far as I know, is true. A lot of things were told to me from my grandmother, grandfather, my mother and dad, and of course I was born and raised in the orchard, and I had met all those people that was involved in owning the orchard, and so I just grew up with it, and so I can truly say that everything in the book is true.
This is the house where the Witwer family lived from 1913 through 1916. There were 7 people in the family, the 3 deputies of my grandfather, who was the marshal here, and his wife, which was my grandmother, and their parents, which was my great-grandparents. They all lived in the house. Back then, a lot more people lived in a house. But this house is, I've forgotten what they call them, but each time the family grows, they build another addition onto the back of the house. I'm going to have you turn around and look over here at a tree, which was where that the River Rats gang wanted to hang my grandfather and the 3 deputies. They actually had the rope in the tree ready to go before the sheriff finally got here and stopped them from doing it. This video shows how the house grew. As the family grew in the old days, they would add on and add on. So in addition to that, there is a little building that's about to fall apart out in the back. That was not an outhouse. It was a storage shed for foodstuffs that people would do canned goods from fruit and vegetables that they raised during the summer, and that was where they would store them. This is the city jail or town jail where my grandfather, who was the marshal in 1913 through 1916, kept prisoners who had violated whatever kind of laws, including those who were part of the River Rats gang. Unfortunately, their families would bail them out the next day, so they didn't worry too much about being incarcerated by Marshal Charlie Witwer. That's why they called the town a town divided against itself. Unfortunately, that's what happened. Doreen told me that somebody here in town took all the old jail cell
They did. Well, see, they cut this. Used to have a ceiling on here.
Yeah, right.
And they cut this off right here and opened it up and put this door in.
Yeah.
And to me, it needs to go back the way it was.
Yes.
Put the floor back in it. Here, they had to take that out. Put the fire truck in here. If they had the old bars and stuff on the.
Well, somebody in town has those. This is the house where the Deeds family lived, where Clarence Bum Deeds was the son, and he was also the leader of the River Rats gang. He was a very nice looking 30-year-old boy with wavy hair, very muscular. He liked to spend his days fishing or harassing people, not necessarily in that order. The reason they called him Bum Deeds was because that's exactly what he was, a bum. He did nothing for a living except harass people, sell whiskey to the farm workers over here, which he would go to Missouri and buy very cheap liquor and come over here and resell it. That was one of their main income sources. This is the general store, the Patterson General Store, where my grandfather came on the 16th of March 1916 to get his mail. When he arrived here at this building, there were 4 of the River Rats gang waiting for him. My grandfather never carried a gun except that night. My great-grandmother, who was an Indian, she had these visions of good, bad, and otherwise. She said, "Charlie, why don't you take your gun to go get the mail, or don't go at all?" He says, "Well, I'm going to go, but I will take my gun." When he got here, there were 4 of the gang here. They were going to kill him, they were going to kill the mayor, they were going to kill all the deputies, they were going to kill their families. They were ready to change the town back to what it was before the Witwer brothers became the law enforcement of the city. This building is no longer being in use. It's probably going to be torn down. But right where I'm standing is where they started to wrestle my grandfather down to the ground, but he managed to get away from them. But then they caught him again and he killed the gang leader. This is the Witwer Road in Scott County, Illinois, named after one of the deputies of Marshal Charlie Witwer. Ernest Witwer was his name. He was very successful in the farming business after he was no longer a marshal deputy with Marshal Charlie Witwer. That was in about 1917 and thereafter.